welcome back to Joey Dylan Reacts. It's been a minute because I'm a dumbass and I don't know how to record YouTube videos apparently. But Dylan's also a dumbass because he hasn't been here.
Shut up! You record at 3 a.m. in the morning.
No, I don't.
Literally what you just told me.
No.
Okay, whatever.
Alright, well, whatever. Today we're going to be reacting to animated horror stories.
Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, he's retarded.
You are too?
I'm not. Never been. Alright, well, let's get started.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn my volumes up.
Oh my god.
I have always been a huge fan of horror movies. This story is out of that time when the movie Paranormal Activities came to theaters. I went to watch the movie with two of my friends, James and Andy. Needless to say, we were thrilled after watching this movie. The concept of moving into a house and witnessing supernatural occurrences gave us an adrenaline rush.
Animated?
One evening, Andy and I went to James's house for a sleepover. We were chilling in James's room.
Oh, nice.
James started to talk about some articles he read online that has claimed haunted houses do exist. I was sitting near his bedroom window and smoking when Andy said,
"Smoking's bad.
Chris, give me a drag." I passed the cigarette to him and said, "I have also read such articles. I wish we could visit a haunted house." Andy exhaled smoke out of the window and replied,
"Smoking's
"Who
bad,
says you can't?"
kids."
And started smiling with mysterious eyes. James said in a surprised voice, "What do you mean?" Andy turned to us and said, "There is a house residing near Crystal Lake. It's a half-an-hour drive from our town. People say that house is haunted." James scratches his head and said, "Oh, you mean the Millard house?"
I'm so entertained
I was
right
clueless
now.
about this place completely, so I interrupted their conversation and said, "What house? Who's Millard?"
Millard.
James immediately got up from his bed and switched on his laptop. He surfed a few minutes and then said, "Yes, I was right. I read about this place. This house has a very horrifying history. Years ago, a man named William Millard lived there. He had a beautiful daughter. But that man was very strict and hardly let his daughter go out of the house. One day, he found out that the daughter was having an affair with their mailman. Mr. Miller got so angry that he lost his senses and pushed his daughter down the stairs. The daughter broke her back and could never walk like a human. Some say she crawled around the entire house at night like a dog. A week after this incident, passerbys called the cops complaining about a rancid smell coming from the house. As the cops entered the house, they discovered Mr. Millard's dead body near the stairs. He fell from the stairs and broke his neck. They found the daughter dead on her bed. I smirked and said, "What is so horrifying about that? The daughter probably took revenge on her father and later killed herself too." James looked at me with wide eyes and said, "As per the forensic report, the daughter died on 20th March, 1 p.m. in the afternoon on her bed. And Mr. Millard's time of death? Pronounced 20th March, 1 a.m. at night. There was no sign of forced entry into the house. So yeah, people say the daughter's angry spirit killed her father." Andy said, "Want to check out the place? What say?" James and I agreed to him, and we decided to go to Crystal Lake that weekend. I took my brother's car, and we left one Saturday evening. We wanted to feel the chills, so we chose to go after dark. I will forever regret this decision. Andy was right. It took us 30 to 35 minutes to reach there. The place, Crystal Lake, was an appropriate name, as the lake water was reflecting the entire starry night sky like a mirror. We parked our car near the lake. It was a full moon night. The moonlight was flooding all over the place. The Millard house was standing like a giant on the other side of the lake. We didn't know that to reach the house, we have to cross the lake. Luckily, there were two small boats tied to the wooden platform of the lake. The ambiance around us was looking very spooky.
That's a good drawn boat.
Due to the vast open area, we could hear each and every sound.
Those are good boats right
the
there.
Crickets chirping, the hollow wind passing by, and the churning water waves in the lake. James locked his car, and we got onto a boat. James and I started to paddle the boat while Andy fixed our flashlight. When we reached the opposite side of the lake, the house appeared way scarier than it did before.
Way scarier?
The broken windows were hanging as if they would fall at any moment. Weeds have grown all over the walls of the house. There was no sign of light coming from the house. We stepped on the house porch and pushed the main door. The main door opened with a loud creaking noise, signifying no human being entered here in decades. Andy flashed the light inside, and almost a colony of bats flew overhead, scaring the shit out of us.
Ooh,
I said in a tensed voice, "Guys, are you all sure about this?" Andy replied, "Come on now, stop being a kid." James and Andy got inside, and I had to follow them. The entire house was in darkness. The only source of light was our one flashlight and the pale moonlight coming out of the broken window. We realized we are standing in the living room of the house and noticed a huge stairway lying in the middle of the room. James said in a low voice, "This is the stairway from where Mr. Miller fell down and died, breaking his neck." Cobwebs and dust were surrounding all over the house. I even saw a few bats hanging from the ceiling of the house. Andy flashed his light towards the left corner and said in a mocking voice, "Check this out, guys." We saw a painting hanging on the left corner wall. We went there and saw an oil painting featuring an old man with an angry-looking face standing near a fireplace. I wonder who it is when you guys just read
and
about just beside him, a girl aged around 17 to 18 years sitting on a chair. "This must be Mr. Millard and his daughter," said James.
No, they just look
The girl was actually good-looking, but even in that picture, one could easily tell how extremely sad she was. It felt like tears will roll down her eyes any minute. Andy said in a sarcastic tone, "If I have her, I would have to keep her away too." I was getting really annoyed with his disgusting jokes. I said, "You should not say things like that. It's very disrespectful, man. Think about all the torture she has gone through." Andy shrugged his shoulders and replied, "Yeah, whatever."
Why is his
and started to walk towards the staircase. James said, "Where are you going?" He replied, "Let's see the daughter's room. We have come so far not to roam around the house for a while. It's anyways obvious there's no ghost here." James started following him too. I turned around to go with them too, but just then, I felt like I heard a giggling sound. I stopped and said, "Guys, did you hear that?" James said, "Hear what, Chris?" Before I could tell what I just experienced, I heard Andy say from upstairs, "Come on now, enough with your girly tantrums." I felt very insulted and decided not to speak a word to Andy. As I walked upstairs, I heard the wooden stairs creaking with the pressure of my feet. After reaching upstairs, I saw James and Andy standing in front of a closed door. I asked, "What's wrong?" James replied while turning the doorknob, "I think the door is jammed. It's not opening." Andy told, "Hold the light. Let me try." Andy tried really hard but couldn't open the door. We were standing there in front of the closed door and thinking about what to do next just when we heard a giggling sound. Everyone got shocked by the sudden sound. I said in a panicked voice, "James, I've heard this sound downstairs."
Running windows are not an open world with no limits.
3 seconds
I
after.
think we should leave now. We had enough, guys. Andy flashed the light all over, but we couldn't see anyone. Then he said in a curious voice, "Maybe the sound is coming from this room." I don't know if you will believe me or not, but suddenly, the doorknob clicked on its own and the door opened. We immediately looked at the room. It was an old, dusty room.
Let's
There was a small,
pause video,
torn-out,
give
dirty
them a
bed
tip.
lying in the middle.
We don't have
The
to
pale
pause it.
moonlight coming from the window made the room quite
Don't say,
visible
I don't
to
know
our
if
eyes.
you're gonna believe me or not.
We were
right
about to
as
step
you
into
say
the
what
room
happened.
when we heard the giggling sound again.
Obviously, it's
It
not
was
true.
the sound of subdued laughter of a female voice. The hair at the back of my neck stood up. I said in a whispering voice, "Guys, let's go." Suddenly, James pointed out on the side of the bed facing the window and said in a scared voice, "What? What is that, Andy?" I felt as if a dog-like creature was sitting near the window, but it was too dark for us to see things clearly. Andy pointed the flashlight into that direction, and our blood turned cold. There was a girl on the ground near the window. She was standing like a frog. She was facing the ground. For a moment, none of us could utter a single word.
Yeah.
It was as if all of our hearts stopped at the very moment, and we can't move anymore. The girl lifted her face, and the flashlight started to flicker. We couldn't see her face clearly due to the flickering, but then the light kept switching on and off for no reason. And with every flash of light, we could see the girl's vicious face with changing expression. With the first flash, we saw her sad face. With the second flash, we saw a huge ear-to-ear smile on her face. With the third flash, we saw her expressionless face with wide eyes as if she can see through us. We were so shocked that we almost forgot to run. Just then, the girl made the same spine-chilling giggle and started to crawl towards us vigorously like a hungry demon. We all finally got our senses back and started to run for our lives.
Senses.
James and I were in front, and Andy was running behind us.
Unless you're
James
blind
kept
or
saying, "Run, run!"
Or deaf.
Andy was screaming like a 10-year-old, saying, "Don't leave me here! Please! She is behind me!" We reached the main door and turned around for Andy.
Dude, you're
We
good.
saw
If
Andy
you just
was
fall,
almost halfway on the
you'll
stairs,
kill
and the girl
with your
was
hair,
crawling
dude.
behind him,
Yeah.
following him like an animal.
Spike you.
Somehow, we all managed to get out of the house and jumped on the boat. Andy dropped the flashlight on the lake in a fit of fear.
Of course.
James
you
and
dropped
I
the flashlight.
started paddling like maniacs. Andy was sitting on the boat, facing his back at the house. He got so freaked out that he kept saying, "I can still hear her evil laughter. Paddle faster, faster." James and I realized that he has gone into shock, because as far as our eyes went, there was no one in front of the house. James said in a low, panting voice, "Maybe she can't leave the house." I didn't say anything, just kept paddling. I still don't know how we managed to return home that night, but ever since this incident, news about any haunted place makes me
I
sweat.
know how you guys returned home. You guys paddled on a boat.
Yeah.
This happened 19 years ago, and it sure as hell was
Of
the
course,
most
it was like
frightening and tragic
1954,
event
dude.
that has and will certainly continue to mark
What's
me
the story
till the
called?
rest of my days. I just want to preface this
Guy
by also
Close
telling
Cody.
you that if you're easily disturbed, the story isn't for you.
Yeah.
Why does he sound like that, bro?
On with the story.
Every kid's here.
It was the
Anybody
evening of
kids here
January
watching
the
this video,
13th,
you're gonna get scared.
2001, and I was at a ski colony with two of my good childhood friends, Josh and Mark. In the colony,
Of course
we were
it's
roughly
Josh.
about
Why
40
wouldn't it be
kids,
any other day?
ranging anywhere from
Why do
8 to
people like
16
that?
years old, and we stayed in a giant hotel for about 2 weeks. Josh, Mark, and I were all 14 years old, and this was our first time ever on a ski colony together. We were all more or less troublemakers and liked to get into dangerous situations, but what I'm about to tell you was a consequence of us going too far. It was the second week of the trip, and skiing the same slopes got a little repetitive. We were getting bored of skiing at the ski park as well, so we decided to do some off-slope exploring, meaning instead of skiing on the slopes, we go off to the side and into
Yeah,
the
that is what
forest
you just
while
said,
still
huh?
keeping sight of the skiing tracks. One day, we were with our assigned group, which consists of about 8 kids. We were skiing at the very top area of the mountain, and that's when we decided to go off track. We had ventured our way down, and Mark said he would keep an eye on the track next to us. We all ski extremely fast,
Mark.
and for some reason, Mark wanted to compete on who could be the fastest without hitting any trees. I accepted, and all 3 of us went down even faster this time. It was now getting even steeper, and I was a little ahead than the 2 of them. That's when we all rapidly approached some sort of cliff that I had fallen down from. I assumed none of us saw it, because we all sort of made the jump. As soon as I hit the floor, though, I stopped and looked behind me to see if everyone landed safely, because it wasn't a small jump to make. I saw Josh land right next to me, and he was fine, but Mark landed pretty harshly and sort of lost balance. Josh and I go up to him to check if he's okay, and that's when we realized we lost the track. Josh proposed the idea that we go back up, but it was impossible. It was too steep, and anyone who skis knows it takes significant time and effort to walk up a steep mountain in the snow while carrying skis. And besides, the cliff behind us was too tall to climb. We
Can you go
decided to just
around it?
keep going down, and while we were doing so, turn to the right side. We go down slowly this time, and keep turning to the right, but unfortunately, there's just more of the same forested area. We figure out it's hopeless, and stop a second time to make out a plan. Mark loses all hope, and we all more or less tell him that it's okay. But it was now slowly getting dark, and kind of came to the terrifying conclusion that we were lost. At this point, we spent a good hour sitting down and talking, and it was seriously getting cold for all of us. We all make up our minds
They're
to just
retarded,
keep
they don't
sliding
know what they're
down,
doing.
because it
What?
would at
They're
some
retarded.
point
You
lead
could
us
have
to
went
civilization.
around and jumped,
And
you could have went
besides,
through the
We
forest
had no
and around
choice
and jumped
but to
the
go
cliff.
down.
Or you could have
As
just
we
stayed on
slide
the
down,
trail.
it's getting increasingly darker, to the point where we barely make out what's in front of us. That's when Josh spots out a light in the far distance to the left. As we get closer to it, we realize it's a small, sketchy-looking wooden cabin We knock on the front door, and as soon as we do, we hear a woman screaming from inside. What the hell? We all look at each other in shock. After a couple of seconds, we hear a loud bang, and the screaming abruptly stops. Mark backs off and tells us, maybe this isn't a good idea. To be honest, we were all freaked out and kind of startled, backing away from the door. As soon as we did, though, we heard a male voice cussing very loudly. Then, about 20 seconds after, someone opened the door. At this point, we were about 15 feet away from the door, and sprinting towards us were two enraged Rottweiler dogs. We immediately started running away. The dogs eventually caught up to Mark and Josh, while I somehow made it behind a bush, a little far off into the forest. I waited there for about 5 minutes, trying to catch my breath. All of a sudden, I noticed some light coming from about 100 feet in the clearing. I peeked up and saw the man walking towards me, seemingly following my footsteps. I decide there's no other way for me not to get killed besides quietly walk around the forest in a circle and slowly make my way back to the house. So I quietly shifted back to the side of the bush from where he couldn't see me. I somehow make it inside the house and immediately try to find a phone. Luckily, I find a phone on the kitchen counter and call the cops. I briefly tell them I'm in grave danger and that they should track the location of the phone I'm calling from. I then proceed to go upstairs to find somewhere to hide. I notice there's an attic ladder brought down, so I climb up. As soon as I do, I get hit with a strong smell, like something rotting. For some reason, the light is on, and I look around for a good hiding spot. That's when, in the far corner of the attic, I first notice a group of flies lying around. Then I see it. It was a dead corpse. It appeared to be a woman, with her face brutally beat up. Before I have any time to process, I suddenly hear the front door close shut. I quickly hide behind a shelf and hear the guy yelling something along the lines of, "I know where you're hiding, you sneaky f***." I then notice there's a window right behind me. Fortunately, it was a window built in the slanted roof, meaning I could make it on the top of the roof. I open it, push off the snow, and somehow shove myself through and make it onto the roof, closing the window in the process. A couple of minutes later, I hear the shelf underneath me crash down, and the guy cussing. I also hear a helicopter coming from a distance. As soon as I sigh in relief, though, I suddenly see the window opening. That's when I remembered I must have put some snow on the attic floor by climbing onto the roof. I quickly keep it shut by standing on it. The lights of the helicopter shine on me, and I see it's now directly above me, with the rope being thrown down. I grab the rope, and right as I do, some object hits my feet, shattering the glass of the window. This guy broke the window. He tries grabbing for my feet, but I'm just out of reach as I climb up the rope and the helicopter goes back up.
Yeah, what happened to his friends?
I don't want to bore you too much with the details of the aftermath, but Josh was severely bruised, but managed to kill the dog he was fighting with. But Mark unfortunately ended up being paraplegic from the dog chewing his legs while he was knocked unconscious from it.
Tired of getting lowball offers for your car? Get what it's really worth. At the Kenwood Dealer Group by
Hitting his head on a
Oh, by the way,
tree.
none of these videos are
The guy trying to kill us allegedly killed his own
Go to
wife
the apps.
and had a life sentence to prison. We never made it back to see anyone from that colony, though we damn well learned to follow the most simple rules from that day on.
Japan.
This is
Alright,
a
guys, this is the
horrible
last one, I
experience
think.
that happened
Yeah.
during the 2020 quarantine.
What's it called?
2020.
I went on a
What's
solo
Suicide
trip to
Forest?
Japan and got stuck there amidst the coronavirus
scary.
outbreak. Luckily, I met a guy on my hiking program and became friends with him. His name was Hiroshi. Hiroshi was born and brought up in Japan. He lived with his parents in a small township of Japan. I was completely helpless, as all the flights were postponed, declaring a lockdown all around the world. Hiroshi invited me to stay with his family until the airports became active again. I must say, people in Japan are very close to nature. The way their houses were built in villages suffices that they love being in nature. Hiroshi's house was exactly like that. It was a small two-storied wooden house.
Oh, that ain't even a
Hiroshi shared his
Japan
room with me.
name, bro.
His mother made an extra bed on the wooden floor. They were some of the nicest people I have ever met in life. One morning, I was having breakfast with them when Hiroshi's father came home with a sad face. Now,
Oh no,
let me
Hiroshi.
tell you that Hiroshi's village is quite far from the urban area, so the effect of the pandemic was mild there. Seeing his father's upset face, Hiroshi asked, "What happened, Papa?" His father replied in a sad tone, "Another suicide has been reported in Aokigahara. Local people are saying it was a woman in her late 30s. God knows how many lives will this forest take." I wasn't aware of the topic of this conversation, so I kept staring at them blankly. After breakfast, Hiroshi and I went for a walk around the village. I asked him, "What is Aokigahara?" Hiroshi said, "It's a forest nearby our village. People often call it the suicide forest." I had no idea about any of this, so I kept staring at him with a very surprised look. Hiroshi went on saying that local people believe the forest to be a haunted place. In fact, many people have claimed to see ghosts inside that forest. I asked, "How far is the forest?" He replied, "Not much. It's half an hour hike from our house.
Why does mouth
We
move
have
it
nothing
like
to
that?
do anyway. Also, going out and spending time in the wild will help us to refresh our mind."
White
So I
people,
said,
am I right?
"Hey, let's go and visit this place. Anyways, we're getting
Can we
bored
stop
by sitting home,"
investigating? We getting a bad rep
Hiroshi
here.
said in a worried voice.
That's how y'all know.
"I don't know.
I'm
I
glad
have to ask
Hiroshi
my parents
dies.
first. There are many scary stories about this place."
'Cause I know these ghosts
As
are
the
racing,
sun
so I
started
know
to set,
Hiroshi dies.
we decided to head back home. In the evening, we were sitting in the living room. Hiroshi looked to his parents and mentioned the hiking trip to the suicide forest. Though they denied at first, after our repeated requests, his father finally gave us permission. But he told us to leave the place before dark. I agreed because I anyway had no
My
intention
father is a
of staying
dumbass.
inside a
They
dark
know these
forest
ghosts
that
are
has numerous
fucking
reported cases
racist. They
of
gonna kill
suicide.
Hiroshi.
The next morning,
These ghosts
Hiroshi and
don't
I
got
packed our
nothing on.
bags and started our journey. I was in a
I was an
relaxed
old
mood
dude.
that
Did
finally,
Marka die?
after 2
Did they
weeks,
say that
we
Marka
were stepping
died?
outside this
Mark,
village.
yeah, Marker.
We were
Yeah, he
almost
died.
near the last house in the village.
Josh is still good
The
though.
mountain road went ahead from its left. 30 minutes walk on that road
The- what's
will
the
lead us
fuck
to
are they?
Aokigahara. At the doorstep of the last house,
The other guy?
we saw an
Yeah.
old man sitting on a wooden chair. We were about to walk past him when he stood up and grabbed my hand.
Okay.
I got a bit startled and said, "Hey, are you okay?" His eyes were gloomy as if he was daydreaming. The wrinkles on his face denoted how extremely old he is.
That's Hiroshi
Hiroshi
Senior.
said in a shaken voice, "What is it, Pa?" The man didn't look at him. Instead, he just stared at me and then said in a feeble voice, "Kizuku Kuchisaki Onna. Kizuku Kuchisaki Onna." It goes without saying that I didn't understand his words at all, but Hiroshi's terrified face told me that this old man is saying something scary. I was getting freaked out with his behavior. I freed my hand from his grip and stepped away from him. Hiroshi said in a shaken voice, "We should get going. Come on, Jack." With mixed feelings, I started to walk with Hiroshi. The house was going away from our sight, but the old man kept standing there while muttering the same words. I turned back to my friend and asked, "What was he saying? Who is that guy?" Hiroshi took a pause and said, "He is the oldest man in our village. We address him as Pa. People say he has the ability to see the future and predict bad times." I said with surprised eyes, "What did he say in Japanese?" Hiroshi took a pause and said,
Japanese.
"His words translate, 'Beware of Kuchisaki Onna.'" I obviously had no idea what this term Kuchisaki Onna meant, so I kept staring
some
at
dude,
Hiroshi with
dumbass.
curious
Some
eyes.
Japanese dude.
Hiroshi said, "In
Obviously.
Japanese folklore, we have an urban legend named Kuchisaki Onna, the slit-mouthed woman.
Why do these
According to
ghosts
legend,
want to kill their own
Kuchisaki
kind?
Onna was the unfaithful wife or concubine of a samurai. As punishment for her infidelity, her husband sliced the corners of her mouth from ear to ear. Other versions of the tale include that her mouth was mutilated during a medical or dental procedure. that she was mutilated by a woman who was jealous of her beauty, or that her mouth is filled with numerous sharp teeth. After her death, the woman returned as a vengeful spirit. She covers her mouth with a cloth mask, or, in some iterations, a hand fan or handkerchief. She also carries a sharp instrument with her, which has been described as a knife, machete, or a large pair of scissors. Kuchisaki Onna sneaks up on her victims in the dark and asks them if they think she is beautiful. If the victim answers yes, she pulls off her mask and reveals a red, blood-dripping, grotesque mouth. Then she asks, in a grisly voice, if they still think she is beautiful, adding, even now. If her victim answers no or screams in terror, she slashes them from ear to ear in an imitation of her own mutilation. If they lie and answer yes a second time, she walks away, only to follow her target home and slaughter him brutally that night. I won't lie, but this horrible story actually gave me goosebumps. I noticed we have reached the forest. Hiroshi said, "Let's go. We have an hour before dawn. We must stick together or else we can get lost." I have never seen such a silent forest. I mean, every place has its own kind of sound, but this forest made me feel like I have to step into a completely different world where no living creature is allowed to enter. Suddenly, a question came to mind. I asked Hiroshi, "But why did your pa say that we have to be aware of this slit-mouthed woman? This is just a scary story, right?" Hiroshi looked around the dark forest and replied, "I don't know why Pa reacted this way. I noticed tension on his face, as if he is not telling me something." We walked around the forest for a few more minutes and then decided to take a break before leaving for home. We sat on a big rock under a nearby tree. I drank water from the flask and said, "So, how can someone save themselves from this urban legend of yours?" Hiroshi smiled and said, "Are you scared, Jack?" I replied awkwardly, "No way. I'm just asking you to complete the story, that's all." Hiroshi lit up a cigarette and said, "An individual can survive an encounter with Kuchisaki Onna by using one of several methods. In some versions of the legend, Kuchisaki Onna will leave the potential victim alone if they answer yes to both of her questions, though in other versions, she will visit the individual's residence later that night and murder the person while sleeping. Other survival tactics include replying to Kuchisaki Onna's question by describing her appearance as average, giving the individual enough time to run away." As soon as Hiroshi finished his last sentence, something unexpected happened. We were sitting facing a bush nearby. Beside that bush, the forest was even denser. Suddenly, I saw the bush moving. A rustling sound of leaves took place. We both sat silently, staring at the bush. I looked at Hiroshi and saw his freaked out face. The cigarette in his hand has dropped on the ground. I asked in a fearful voice, Who is that?" Just when we noticed something, and all the blood in our veins turned cold. As the bushes moved, a head started to appear behind that. A woman slowly stood up from those bushes. Her eyes looked lifeless, and the strange thing was, her mask. For a moment, I thought, a pandemic is going around. Maybe that's why she is wearing a mask. But then she came to us and asked, "Am I beautiful?" My head started to throb in fear. I don't know what to say. Hiroshi grabbed my hand and said, "Run!" We started to run without seeing where we were going. Chilling laughter came out of that woman's mouth. As I turned back, I saw her. Yes, I saw her. It was her. Her mouth was slashed from ear to ear. Sharp teeth made her laughing terrifying. Somehow, we managed to come out of the forest, and finally, we reached the village, where we were out of breath. We sat on the village grounds and started to gasp for air. A few local people came and took us home, thinking we were feeling sick. The next morning, I woke up with a high fever. Hiroshi was sick to his stomach for 3 days. I still don't know if what we saw was real or our imagination. Later, we asked Hiroshi's pa, and he said the suicide forest is filled with many yere, that is, ruined or departed spirits, and that was indeed some malevolent spirit who tried to frighten us by taking the shape of this Japanese legend, Kuchisaki Onna. We never went back to that forest as long as I stayed with them.
Not really.
But what do you think? Did we really see Kuchisaki Onna in the suicide forest? Or was it something else?
Nah, I just looked the same.
I think we should just end it there.
Yeah.
Tinder! The story's called Tinder.
We can't end it here, can we?
I feel like we can't. Maybe we can make a part 2 if we feel like it.
Yeah, we can make a part 2. Alright, what's up, guys? That is gonna be the end of the video.
Watch out for Kuchi Sandiano or whatever her name is.
Yeah. Japanese people are crazy. Don't get killed by them.
Ew.
You might die.
Ew.
Well, anyway. Bye. 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 Bye.
Don't go in random forces or